Good afternoon. I am Tony Mason, President and CEO of the Indianapolis Urban. Good afternoon. I'm Tony Mason, President and CEO of the Indianapolis Urban League, and I also serve as the co-director of the Indianapolis African American Quality of Life Initiative. And I want to thank you for joining us today for this very important update and conversation about the Indianapolis African American Quality of Life Initiative. I am joined this afternoon by Dr. Carlin Tishner, who serves as our Director of Operations. And we will also be joined by Mr. Willis Bright, who serves as the co-director of the Quality of Life Initiative, and he also serves as the chair of the African American Coalition of Indianapolis. We are excited to be able to reconnect with you to give you the latest updates on the work that we've been doing on this incredibly important initiative. And so with that, I want to give Dr. Tishner a chance to bring brief welcome.
Thank you, Tony. And again, good evening to all of you. It's a pleasure to be with you. As Tony said, I'm the Director of Operations and certainly excited to share with you an update since the last time we were sharing this update with you all, with the incredible work that we've been able to do in partnership with many of you in the community, as well as our expert facilitators and the team that helped us develop the RFPs. So we look forward to sharing this great news with you and look forward to what occurs after tonight's conversation.
And so now we're going to run through our presentation, and part of what we plan to do is to take you a few steps back so you can understand how we arrived to where we are today with our processes, and then we're going to let you know what is to come. And so if we could cue up our presentation, we'll get started. And so the first thing we're going to talk about is our journey. And so in essence, on August 5th of 2020, the Lilly Endowment made a $100 million grant award to the National Urban League. And the grant dollars are to go to support the work of the Indianapolis Urban League and the African American Coalition on what we have called or named the Indianapolis African American Quality of Life Initiative. The intentions are that this will be a place-based grant-making effort in this community, an effort that is centered around making transformational change in the community. And so we want to impact through our work the quality of living for African Americans in Indianapolis and Marion County specifically. And our work is going to be focused on making improvements to impacts in education, employment, health, housing, as well as Black business development and entrepreneurship. And a little bit more about the organizations that are partnering to do this work. Next slide, please. So with respect to the partners, again, as I shared earlier, the National Urban League, which has been around for over 100 years and has Urban League affiliates in over 90 communities across the country, where the Urban League is delivering direct services as well as advocacy work impacting over 300 communities and 200 people nationwide. You also have the Indianapolis Urban League, which I lead here in the community, where we have been around now since 1965, and we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan, interracial, community-based social service and civil rights organization. We provide a number of direct services and programs in this community, and we're excited about the work that we're doing, and we're excited, of course, to be partnering with the African American Coalition of Indianapolis, which has been around now since 2004, and it is a group of groups, as Dr. Bright would say, 20 autonomous civic, religious, professional, social service organizations that are all working to have an impact in the community. So when you think about the African American Coalition of Indianapolis, you're not only talking about the Indianapolis Urban League, you're talking about organizations like Indiana Black Expo, the 100 Black Men. You're also talking about the National Council of Negro Women and a number of organizations that are doing substantial work in the community, organizations large and small, grassroots, grass tops. Next slide, please.
So just want to indicate here, Tony, part of what we wanted to just share tonight, in addition to what Tony has shared, was really an overview of what got us here to this point that we're going to share updates about. And so the next slide is going to give you an illustrative overview over what we heard from the Comprehensive Opportunities Assessment.
So you can go ahead, Carlin.
So before, you heard us talk at length about 2 data collection processes that we engaged. And Engaging Solutions, here based in Indianapolis, partnered with IAAQI to engage community stakeholders to help us identify what are the primary issues and priorities that we need to address in this fund. So a primary question we asked very often was, if you had dollars to address issues in your community, what would be some of those primary topics of concern? And so as you see here is this word chart, this very illustrative illustration of what the primary issues were. Now, what you can see is that as the words are larger, that means that more people indicated that is the primary issue for them, which needs to be resolved in order to ultimately improve the quality of life for them in this community of Indianapolis and Marion County. And so ostensibly, you see schools and education as a primary area of concern. What about schools and education? The educational experience of our young people, access to quality education, highly rigorous educational opportunities, and programs that are culturally relevant, that are engaging, and that they're ultimately allowed to move from PK with highly relevant and engaging programs to college and career readiness. And that once they are complete with their degree, that they're able to engage in the community and thrive in the community in meaningful ways. We also heard that job creation, opportunities for employment were very critical issues. When we talk about opportunities for employment, we're not just talking about a job, we're talking about career development and expansion and growth. And we're also talking about a livable wage, a minimum of $19 to $22 per hour with the ability to grow from that baseline level. We also heard that folks had concerns about the healthcare system, opportunities to have quality healthcare and access to great services when they enter the healthcare system, having awareness and information and education about those resources. We additionally heard folks talk about housing, quality housing options, affordable housing options, places to live that were safe, that were protected away from predatory lending practices, but also that had facilities that were indicative of what they desired in their neighborhoods, accessible grocery stores, as well as walkable facilities and environments that allowed them to feel comfortable in their communities. In addition to that, we heard food insecurity as a primary issue of concern. We recognize that in many urban communities, especially those that have high density of minorities, that access to quality food options is relatively limited. You might hear folks talk about this as an issue around neighborhood poverty, but we also see this as food deserts. And so when we heard the community, we wanted to engage them first, to give them voice to the process so that we can then move into a direction where we had a strong response to the needs from the community as they articulated.
Thank you, Dr. Tishner. Willis Bright has now joined us to be a part of the presentation. As shared earlier, Mr. Bright chairs the African American Coalition of Indianapolis, and he also serves as the co-director of the Indianapolis African American Quality of Life Initiative. Welcome, Willis.
Well, good afternoon, all. It's good to hear you and to see you. And we're glad that you have joined us this evening to find out a bit more about what we're doing to improve the quality of life for African Americans in Indianapolis and Marion County. Should I move on with how we got to the investment strategies?
Yes, you can talk about the investment strategies.
Carlin spoke with Dr. Tishner, spoke about the engagement of the community in identifying issues, and you saw some of those. In addition to that, we also wanted to consult with experts in the 5 areas that Tony spoke about earlier. And what we did was to have issue pillars, and those groups that range from 25 to 40 people, people who are practitioners, grant makers, policy people, etc., identified what they saw as the critical areas that they believe would make a difference. We integrated the thinking of both the community and the experts, and were able then to come up with the strategies that we will talk about. So if you can show the slides for the strategies, I'll begin to develop those. And round 1, in business, there were 2 areas that were believed by not only the issue folks and people in the community, but our further discernment about what needed to be done to expand and promote, grow Black businesses, was the need for increased capital, to increase equity for business development. That is not only for necessarily for operations, but for equipment, all of the things that might make a venture successful. In addition, there is a need to build the capacity of organizations, a number of organizations which we have brought together in a network, who are trying to provide the education and mentoring, and in some cases even funding for Black businesses and entrepreneurs. They need to build their capacity to increase their ability to bring all the competencies that businesses need to be most effective. So part of our funding will be to support those. Later, Tony will give you an idea of what are the dollars that we'll be allocating to each of these areas. I'll take a couple more, and then I'll turn that over to Dr. Tishner and to Tony. So you want to flash up one of the other areas? Education. Education is so critical to all of our community, not only to children, but to adults. But this focuses on children. In order for children to learn, they have to have teachers that are aware of who they are culturally, who they are in terms of their ethnicity, and also that the teachers themselves are not acting out of attitudes and values they may have been raised with as it relates to folks of color, but are basically being trained to be enabling. And we know that there are people who are providing education for teachers so that they can be able to approach our children with learning styles, discipline, and sensitivity to the trauma that young people have made. This work here with teachers and leaders is even going to be more critical in light of all of the politicalization of education. As you are well aware, from the General Assembly to parents groups, they're trying to shut teachers down in terms of their ability to present a full spectrum of the life of America and the life of all of the groups that are in it. One of the big issues that has been on the minds of our community groups and upon the experts is the need to recruit and retain teachers of color, especially African-American teachers and also Black male teachers. While when we started, recruiting was a critical issue, retention has surfaced as a greater issue as more and more teachers are leaving school corporations as a result of the adjustments to deal with COVID, the kinds of pressures from the politicalization of education, and even from the fact that children are coming back having been out of school 2 years and have attitudes that are making it very difficult for many teachers to want to stay. So recruiting and retention of teachers of color. And then early childhood, making sure that young people get a good start early on preschool so that they can be able to read and compute by the time they're in their first grades. And employment, and then I will turn it over. It was mentioned earlier that we need to have more jobs with a livable wage. And we believe that some of those jobs have a technology based, and even those jobs that may be in manufacturing and other areas. Indiana has distinguished itself for advanced manufacturing, require a great deal more technical knowledge than the factory did many years ago. So we are hoping that we will see proposals that speak to trying to bring technical skills and critical thinking to people, particularly recent graduates who may not be headed to post-secondary, people who've been involved in the justice system, and individuals who've been out of work or returning to the workforce, especially those that do not have a high technology background. So we hope that we will get proposals that will allow folks to move not only into the 20th and 21st century, but have skills that will equip them to be future workers. Dr. Carlin or Tony, you want to take over? You're muted, Tony.
So up next, I will talk about our priority or strategy in the area of health and wellness. And what we want to focus on in the first round is food justice and quality options. What this involves is investing in programs and initiatives and organizations with goals and strategies to address food sovereignty, justice, and access to high quality food options. It is no secret that in Indianapolis and Marion County, we have a number of neighborhoods and areas within our community that are designated as food deserts. In fact, we know that over 82,000 African Americans in the city of Indianapolis live in what have been described as food deserts. And so we want to leverage our resources in partnerships to ensure that we make a difference in making sure that African American families and all families in Indianapolis and in struggling neighborhoods have access to high quality food options. And so we also want to make sure that we are taking steps to work with community partners as well to address issues around food sovereignty and food justice. And so we're excited about what will come from the work that will be done in the health and wellness space in round one on food justice and quality options. Okay, on the next issue of priority is focused on housing and home ownership. And the first strategy being focused on home ownership and economic mobility. We want to make sure that we leverage through grants funds that will increase owner-occupied home repair in the community and help to finance to support current owners in predominantly Black neighborhoods, especially those that are threatened by gentrification and predatory real estate investors, to maintain their residency, their home value, while supporting wealth building for themselves and their families. What we see happen far too often when neighborhoods get revitalized in Indianapolis, we know that the tax base goes up. Families that have lived there for decades struggle financially to stay in their homes. And so we want to make sure that that doesn't happen, but we also want to make sure that resources are available for those families to invest in much needed, long overdue repairs in their homes. And so we want to make sure that the Quality of Life Initiative supports those efforts and agencies or organizations, nonprofit organizations that do that work. Strategy number 2 in housing and home ownership involves racial equity and housing development. We want to make sure that dollars are invested in the creation and expansion of affordable housing developments. We know that there's not a lack of access to housing stock in the community. However, there's a major challenge around families accessing affordable housing. And so we want to make sure that we support those developments, including those that address the lack of equity funding, dollars for land acquisition, pre-development funding, as well as gap financing for African American led real estate developers or developments, if you will, and for organizations, community development organizations that are doing this work. Oftentimes, the difference between families being able to purchase their homes under reasonable terms that they can manage and afford simply involves just having a few extra dollars to support their investment in housing. Next slide.
So as we move into the rest of the conversation, we thought it would be helpful to have a conversation between the three of us to sort of frame why and how we got to where we are and what our hopes are before we start talking about what are next steps. It might be helpful for you to get a couple of questions answered. And one question that I think is important for us to answer at this point is, why did it take us so long to get from where we started with the IPP and the COA to now we are approaching March 2022? What were we trying to accomplish between the last time we presented and this point? So I will invite Tony and then Willis to talk about what we've been doing in between that time to ensure that we are providing this opportunity in the best possible way.
Absolutely, Dr. Tishner. In partnership with the National Urban League, one of the commitments that we made to the Lilly Endowment was that we would seek and get input from African Americans in this community at all stations and places and all levels. And so when we talked about the comprehensive opportunities assessment, that was where essentially everyday folks had a chance to weigh in on the things that would improve the quality of living. And so that encompassed everything from surveys to interviews, individual conversations and discussions, Facebook Live events, radio conversations on Radio 1 stations here in Indianapolis, also even a live television broadcast where our young people weighed in on this very, very important topic. It also included the work that Dr. Tishner himself led with our issues prioritization process. And what we found out is when we got into the crux of all of this work, and we'd engaged so many key people from the community, that it took additional conversations and discussions. And then the other part, and I know Dr. Bright Mr. Bright will weigh in, is the idea of we had to build the infrastructure for the work that we're doing. So right now, the three of us that you see that are a part of this discussion today, that all of these conversations started with the three of us. Now we've had to build a team and to put in processes, including even what you will eventually come to see as an online application system. And we do have one of our team members who's not able to be with us today, Alicia Roberts Baird, who plays a key role in helping our granting efforts. And so with that, Mr. Bright, would you please weigh in?
Yes. One thing that took significant time, it's one thing to have a set of issues, even those that we can all agree on, but moving those issue ideas into a request for proposals that then can elicit a grant request from the community took time to do. We brought on consultants who knew the issue areas to take the information from the issues processes that we used and our own reflection to say, we think these are the most immediate strategies that need to be addressed. They had to then go back and look at all the research that had been done and to look at how do they say to people who need to put proposals together, what is important for them to cover in their proposal. So when the RFPs come out shortly, you will see very detailed instruction about what it is that those who are applying, what it is they must cover in their proposal, not only in terms of the fiscal aspects of it, but how they will demonstrate that the work they will do will achieve certain ends so that when we go back and do evaluation, we will be able to make a determination that they, in fact, had been able to achieve what they stated they would do. All of those processes take significant time. And I think at times we were a little ambitious, thinking that we would be able to move more quickly. Because we were doing most of our work virtually, even some of our meetings were done virtually. It just took more time to do so and to do it well, because we wanted to make sure that when things hit the street, i.e., in the form of RFPs, that those who are most likely to be able to address the strategies will have clear instruction on how to do that, especially because, as Tony was suggesting, we're going to have all of our work done on a virtual system called Smarter Select. The applications will be submitted to Smarter Select. The proposals will be reviewed by proposal reviewers online, and then we will do the summarization and ultimately the recommendations for which ones to fund by the National Urban League. All of that will be done electronically and on by computer. So as you can see, to design the infrastructure to do all of that simply just takes some time. And we think you'll be pleased when you see the RFPs coming out very shortly.
Yes. I also would add that we have had to make sure that we work very closely with our partners in this process, including the National Urban League. Because for those of you in the community that may or may not be aware, they are the actual grantee. And so ultimately, when grant awards are made, organizations in this community will be partnering directly with the National Urban League through agreements to do the work of the Quality of Life Initiative. And so their staff has had to work with us and to provide input on the RFPs that Mr. Bright has mentioned, also on the application forms that have been developed. And so we're just excited to see this work all come together. Imagine if you were, in essence, building what is essentially a small foundation operation for a project like this. That's what we have been doing. So again, we really appreciate everyone's patience with us through this work.
Yeah. And one last thing that we have been doing, because $100 million is significant resources, but you know the issue areas that we're trying to address. Our 100 million will not make a dent if we don't have an opportunity to have resources from other funding entities, whether they be foundations, whether they be corporations, whether they be individuals who are not only interested in the issue areas, but will parallel their giving to do the things that we are most interested in. So we have been spending considerable amount of time in meetings with people from those other sectors, from the public sector, et cetera, to try to inform them about what we're proposing to do so that we can be synergistic in having other resources go to the groups that will ultimately be trying to address the concerns.
Yeah, and I love what you said, Willis, and I want Tony to talk about this too, because we've been using, since we began this work in 2020 in August, and that room that Willis took us to just north of some part of our state, that shall remain nameless. But we've been using the word leverage. And so I really want Tony to talk about, why is this word leverage so critical, and talk about your history with previous work and why we need to leverage such an investment in order to make sustainable impact.
Sure, absolutely. We talk about the importance of leverage. As you know, going back to 2020 and the social reckoning in the wake of George Floyd, we have a number of organizations and coalitions and corporations have been looking at racial equity. And so one of the key efforts that has been underway in our community is the Business Equity for India initiative. And that's an example of where our local corporations are coming together with nonprofits to take a look at how corporations can play a key role in addressing racial equity in health and wellness, in employment, and in education. And so imagine if corporations such as Eli Lilly and Company, Cummins, Salesforce, One America, and I could go, the list can go on and on, but imagine if those corporations, Anthem, all invested additional resources either directly into the initiative or in alignment with the initiative's goals, what that could mean for housing. And so the example I always like to share, and many of you may reflect back on the city's Super Bowl effort back in 2012. We had a legacy project that involved the revitalization of the Near East Side, and that involved the Super Bowl host committee coming alongside the Bonner Center and the neighborhood organizations of the Near East Side to bring additional resources to their neighborhood's quality of life effort. So in essence, what transpired was a $1 million matching grant from the NFL, got leveraged into over $150 million of investments in the Near East Side. So everything from streetscape infrastructure improvements to housing, to the People's Health Center, to the Pogues Run Grocer, to the Chase Near East Side Legacy Center on Tech's campus. All of that came about in part with support from not only the Super Bowl effort, but from corporations in this community. And so I know what can be accomplished when you get significant buy-in from the broader community and the corporations who share our values and who want to align with our work. And so we're excited about the things that we think will come from those conversations with the Business Equity for India initiative, but also in the individual conversations that Mr. Bright and I have had with various foundations and supporters and other community organizations as well, whose work centers around or focuses on uplifting challenged people and families in our community. And so those conversations have included having discussions with the United Way, the Central Indiana Community Foundation, and a number of other philanthropic organizations to take a look at how do we all leverage what we do so that we can have a greater impact. If through the Super Bowl effort, we could take 1 million and leverage that into $150 million of investments, just imagine what $100 million could be leveraged into. Who's to say that we couldn't have a $500 million or $1 billion worth of investments directly into issues that impact African Americans in Indianapolis and in Marion County?
Yeah, and so that's what I think is important to lift up. And so Willis talked about the necessary work in the development of the RFPs as we took what was learned from the issues prioritization process and the comprehensive opportunities assessment process, which we call 2 data collection processes that then inform the development of a very detailed and structured process for developing RFPs that transitioned into a review by the National Urban League and the Lilly Endowment, because they are our partners in this process. And as Tony just said, as a simultaneous process, Willis and Tony and the overall team have been investing in developing and leveraging relationships to create alignment across the priorities that were mentioned by Willis previously and by Tony in the other issue priority areas. It's important also to note that in our process of data collection, there were over 30 priorities that emerged, and we are a 5-year funding entity. So the round that you just saw as a first round of listed priorities are just for this first phase. And I want to invite Willis back to the conversation to just talk about the next round of funding opportunities before we jump into the timeline of this specific funding stream.
Yes, we see that we will be able to spread the resources through 2025 when the grant ends. Understand, this was a 5-year grant that will end July 2025. So we expect to have one more round in 2022 We expect to have 2 rounds in 2023 and 1 round in 2024, because in the latter half of 24 and the first half of 25, we will be closing the initiative down. That is, getting our evaluations done and getting our reports ready to submit to the National Urban League so that they will be able to make a timely report to the Lilly Endowment. Now, our wish is that as this work proceeds and as we continue, as Dr. Tishner was suggesting, that this is the first round of the issues and we are doing 9 strategies, there are still 20 plus issues that are still on the table that we will go back to and find strategies to address those, that we will be able to connect what we're doing in each grant round so that we're building cumulatively. And as we also suggested, that our partners in the community, foundation, corporate, and others will be doing similar things so that collectively we will be able to synergize our work and have maximum impact on the issues that we are collectively dealing with and that the initiative is dealing with especially.
So now that you've heard where we are in the process, what we've done since August of 2021, and where we are headed, it's important for us now to share what our timeline is for this first round of funding. And so what we want to just provide you with is a recognition that our intention is to launch the RFPs in the early part of March. Our goal in that RFP launch is to provide a significant window of time for future applicants an opportunity to develop their application in response to the RFP. What's also important is that we recognize that collaborations are really vital in this process. And we know that organizations have historically collaborated very well, and there's an extensive opportunity through this funding stream to create additional collaborations between organizations. It's important to note that once that launch occurs, that we would provide around 6 weeks for applicants to complete their application and submit. You heard Willis earlier talk about our grants management system, which is Smarter Select, and all of this information will be provided on the RFPs for each of the priority areas across the 9 strategies. So we again invite you to visit our website, which is located below. After the launch, we will engage in the application review process. That review process will require 2 really key ideas. Number 1 is that the applicant must be a 501c3 organization, as well as have the necessary liability insurance in order to be funded through this funding opportunity. It's also important to note that after we launch, our goal is to create an opportunity for applicants to ask us questions, and then we'll launch the answers to those questions on our website at a later date. We'll provide a specific window, likely around 2 weeks, for questions to be asked, and then we'll provide those answers on the website and promote those answers so that would-be applicants will be very clear about any question that they have, as well as the general expectations, including our process for reviewing those applications when they are submitted.
It's also important to know that we will have consultants who will be able to assist individual groups that may be putting a proposal together and may have a question about how they optimally make their case, etc. Obviously, we're not going to have people who will be able to come out and write your proposal for you, but at least we will have some folks who have a lot of experience in proposal development who will be able to assist groups in putting their best step forward and their best proposal, which will then go into the Smarter Select system. All of this information will be in the website. There is a banner that keeps going around. We must ask that people come to the website, because all of the things that will be in the next steps, from the RFP to other processes and procedures, that's where they will be lodged.
I just might add, and I know we talked about application requirements. It's important for people to know and understand that with how we're structured, we do have to, per the National Urban League's requirements, issue grant awards to documented 501c3s as evidenced by your IRS letter of determination. And then when we talk about insurance coverage, if it is a nonprofit in the community whose revenues are underneath $500,000, then it's just proof of the appropriate liability coverage. That's a very low bar. So I know that those things can create concerns for some, but we have worked with the National Urban League to make sure that the requirements are reasonable.
Absolutely. And one thing that I want to add here, which again is reinforced by the fact that we have several future opportunities for funding, again, future rounds as well as described, that these expectations listed here are the expectations that will be present for the grant cycles, again, across all of the rounds. And so if you are not necessarily qualified for this first round, or the strategies don't align to your organizational priorities at this point, keep in mind that we have an additional 20 or so priorities that we will address, and that you have future opportunities to apply. And so what I want to do is move to the end of the conversation where we're talking about the next round of funding opportunities, and then again, to shift to what we hope are the outcomes in this overall initiative across the 5 years that we are partnering together under this opportunity that is historic. So I'll invite Willis to just highlight again when this next round will occur, and then I'll ask Tony and Willis to talk broadly around the intended outcomes that they desire personally, and then I'll close us out with some desires that we require and desire as a grant organization.
You see that we would expect to announce the RFPs in the early fall, somewhere around August. And then we would do the same review process and then announce, likely near the end of the year, the second round of grants. What we are hoping to achieve is not only to have strategies that connect with critical issues that have been identified by both the community and by our issue groups, but things that will allow for permanent change to be created. We're hoping, whether it's aiding more children to be ready to go to school, or whether it's getting people into employment in areas that will allow them to have livable wage jobs, or whether it's to allow people who want to stay in their homes to be able to have a safe, comfortable home, and when they want to create more wealth and maybe move on, that they will be able to be competitive rather than having a predatory person come in, as is happening throughout Indianapolis, as people from the East and West Coast are coming in with piles of cash, buying up every dilapidated house, every even good house, and redoing them, and every vacant lot, and making housing incredibly more inaccessible to African Americans. We know that home ownership has gone down. So while we, again, may not be able to solve the whole issues, we at least want to be able, when we do our evaluation, to show that we made a dent in each of the areas where we make strategic investments.
So, we want to make a common sense difference and impact in the areas that you've heard us talk about: Black business development and entrepreneurship, education, employment, health and wellness, as well as housing and home ownership. And we know what that looks like: more Black families in affordable housing, in our neighborhoods. We know that means that more families have access to healthy food options. And as Mr. Bright, more people are employed in jobs with livable wages and benefits with the opportunities for promotion so that they can ascend within their companies to management levels if possible. We want to make sure that we see our young people be taught by more Black teachers. We want to see our young people excel in the classrooms, grades K through 12, and then in post-secondary education and training programs. We want to see those things happen, but we know it knows we have to put in the safeguards, the resources, and the supports that are needed at an early age for our young people. And then with Black businesses, we want to see Black businesses thrive, not just survive, but thrive. That they're here for the long haul, that they have access to loans, that they have access to grants, and that ultimately that they're able to grow so that they can hire more people. Because we know that small businesses are the backbones of hiring and jobs in most communities. And so we know that we can do that through this initiative with us all working together.
And one of the things that we most want to be able to do is to leave organizations, Black-led organizations, in a stronger position to be competitive for resources after this initiative is over. If we don't build the capacity in all technical as well as other areas of planning and mentoring, etc., and build the leadership of groups, then I don't think that we will have been able to say we did a great job. Um, it is not only that African American led organizations need to build their capacity, the not for profit sector as a whole needs to strengthen its ability to do collaborative planning, to do risk assessment, etc. So we will be spending significant time and energy working with community-based groups to find out what they may need to aid them to be as competitive as all other organizations in the community, and that after 5 years, there will be more of a level playing field than we believe exists now, so that groups will be able to compete with their peers in a far more equitable way than we believe exists today.
If I had one last call to action to everyone that is joining us for this discussion today, is it would be that our Black-led organizations, Black serving organizations in this community, that they make sure that when these RFPs are available, that they visit our website, www.iaaqli.org, that they learn everything that they can about this initiative. And don't wait, visit the website now so you can get up to speed. Because the reality of it is a number of you have played a role in informing what our priorities and our strategies are. So in a lot of ways, a number of you have contributed to where we are today. Now make a difference by applying for the funds. And while it's going to be a competitive process and we can't guarantee anyone anything that they'll be funded, but you have to apply. Because we don't want the narrative to be that other organizations applied and we did not. Because the Lilly Endowment was very intentional about wanting to empower Black people and Black organizations to do this work. And so now we all have to continue to step up, and now we have to do more. The work begins when the RFPs hit the streets. You've got to apply, and then we've all got to pull together and do what we need to do to make Indianapolis a better place for African Americans and other people of color. And remember, all of this work ultimately aligns with the motto of the Indianapolis Urban League. We're all about empowering communities and changing lives. But that's not just about the Urban League. It involves all of us, each and every one of you.
And one of our AACI members, Indiana Black Expo, has a motto as well: working together works. And that is clearly the case here, where people will have the opportunity, a not-for-profit can work with a for-profit entity if you believe that for-profit entity brings a skill set that will help you do your project. The dollars will have to go through the not-for-profit entity, but there are no restrictions on who the partners can be to get the work done. All we will want to be able to see, and our reviewers of proposals, that the work will be done to improve the quality of life for African Americans in this community. That will be the bottom line of it. You assemble who you can assemble, you do it in your own unique way. We just will be interested in making sure the results are going to improve the community.
So what's next, might you ask? What do I do now? Well, first, visit the website. It's located at the bottom of the screen. Please visit the website. There are several reports that you can read, including the issues prioritization process report, as well as the comprehensive opportunities assessment report. Those reports are being designed and updated as we speak, so you'll see new versions of those reports. Visit the website as often as you can. Call colleagues, other organizations, tell them, visit the website to learn more. In addition to visiting the website, we also want you to expect the launch of the RFPs to happen in the next 15 to 30 days. And please, once those RFPs are launched, engaged with the RFPs, share those opportunities with organizations that you know do incredible work but are often underfunded, or you know could do additional work if they had additional dollars to expand themselves. Share. And then if they have limitations around capacity, connect them to resources to help them apply so that they can identify ways to engage with this opportunity. Again, it's a historic moment, and we want everyone who can do the work to be able to access the funds to do the work. That's our hope. And the last thing is that our goal is to have an additional convocation at the end of March, the anniversary of our first convocation on March 27th. And that's to give an additional update, which will include at that point the RFPs. And so we'll encourage you, if you are able, to attend that as well. Our goal is to educate, to inform, and to make all aware of this process. We certainly want to be transparent, but we also want to be very critical about the process. And we appreciate you for being a partner with us, for engaging with us, and for being someone and an organization who wants to see the same outcomes that were described by both Tony and Willis this evening.